Zig coming in on the top. Today we have an epic interview, one too epic to do by myself. So I have with me my musical partner in crime, Dakota Michael Kroos.
Yes, and today on the Zig at the Gig podcast, we are here to interview Townsend Coleman, voice acting extraordinaire. You may know him from such roles as
Teen Wolf on Teen Wolf,
Gobo and Wrench Doozer on the Fraggle Rock cartoon,
Waldo from Where's Waldo,
Jason Whittaker on Adventures in Odyssey,
The Tick from The Tick,
and of course, the one and only Michaelangelo from the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon. That's right, the show that started it all for me and Dave, where we began our Turtles obsession.
And Ninja obsession. And for everyone, the word cowabunga is now in the zeitgeist thanks to this guy and this voice.
Yes, as we have told all the listeners before, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are the biggest influence on our band, and it was such an honor and privilege to be able to speak to one of the original voices.
It's so weird to talk with the guy from your childhood. You know what I mean? That's such a weird thing to experience.
Right, and we had such an epic conversation with him.
Oh, he was so generous with his time and his insight, and he just... when we get into it, you're going to notice he jumps into characters, and it's the coolest thing ever.
So epic. He is also a Cleveland local, so we spent a lot of time speaking about the history of Cleveland and things like that.
He got his start on Cleveland radio, and when we went into it, I thought I did enough research to know the one station he was at, but he was at a million stations. So the train of his journey has so many different tracks, and it's amazing that the one that he thought wouldn't be his big break, which was his voice acting, is what we all know him for. And to hear him describe this journey and to be willing to take every chance on anything to make it work is such an inspiring story. And we're going to get into that. We're going to let him explain that. Before we do that, if you can like, rate, review, subscribe to any of the podcasts on any of the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to cool guests like Townsend.
And without further ado, please enjoy our deep and insightful conversation with Townsend Coleman.
Yeah.
But I wanted to kind of get into, your history wasn't always with voice acting. It was with acting, right?
Well, yeah, correct. I mean, I started acting when I was in like junior high school.
Yeah?
Like late elementary. Yeah, junior high school, basically. Yeah.
And was it like through school? Like, was it like a drama club or was it musicals?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I didn't do any musicals when I was in high school. I started doing musicals when I was a DJ on the radio there in Cleveland.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So jumping from acting to radio work, how was that transition? Was it through doing plays and radio work opened up? Because like to do drama, you have to be able to throw your voice. You got to breathe from the diaphragm and be able to carry that. So was there like a point during doing drama that clicked?
You sound very technical there, very technically minded about breathing from the diaphragm. Yeah, no, it sort of all kind of came together. I don't remember. I mean, listen, I went off to college at the, because I grew up there in Cleveland, and over on the east side in Cleveland Heights, and went to high school there, of course, to a private boys prep school way out in Huntington. Listen to me, Hunting Valley. Actually, in Shaker Heights, I was in junior high. At this school called University School, and then was in high school at their newer campus way back when I was still out there in the 70s, late 60s and early 70s, and that was out in Hunting Valley, and so that's where I started really getting involved in theater, but real interested in radio too, because my dad used to be on the radio back when I was a kid, and we lived in Denver. Yeah, so that's where the whole kind of radio thing came from. So when I went out to school in Boulder, Colorado, at University of Colorado there, I went out as an architect major. And that lasted all of about 2 minutes. And I changed to theater, which is what I wanted to do to begin with. But my mom had said, if I'm going to pay for college for you, you're going to, go study something you can get a job in. And I'm like, well, okay. But I really want to be an actor. And so she kind of put the kibosh on that. But I went out there, and after changing my major anyway while I was out at school, I switched to being a theater major and did a lot of theater out there over the course of 2 years, and then quit school after 2 years, and that was that. So I mean, that's really where the theater stuff really kind of gelled for me. But at the same time, I also hung out at the radio station on campus too, and sort of got that side of me, my creator side going. And had the foresight back then to get an FCC first class radio license, which back in those days you needed in order to get a job at a radio station. And so in 1974, when I quit college and went home, came back to Cleveland, I went down. I applied for this job at a radio station that was changing formats, and just miraculously, this program director hired me at this radio station. It was called WKSW back then. I don't know what it is now. It was 99.5 on the dial. So whatever that, whatever station's on that frequency, that's what it was. But it was changing from WNCR at the time, which was a big rock station, and I was a big fan of it. And it was right at the same time that WMMS was starting. And and so it was a very cool time to kind of break into radio. And I ended up working at like 5 different radio stations over 10 years. They're mostly in Cleveland. In 1978, I spent the year of 1978 and early 79 down in Akron at WCUE. I was doing morning drive down there. But then I was at G98 after that in 79, and then went over from there to what was Zip 106 back in 1981. And then that changed to WLTF, and I don't know what their call letters are now. It's 106. Is 106? We called it 106 and a half. Light Rock 106 and a half is what it was called back then. And so that 10 years that I spent on the radio I was also doing a lot of local theater in town at the time too. Some good, some not so good. But the last show that I did was out of Baldwin Wallace College for Berea Summer Theater.
Oh, cool.
In 1982, I did Pirates Penzance.
Nice.
And was the role of acted and sang the role of Frederick in that, and I had a blast. That was a ton of fun. That was the last show that I did in Cleveland on stage. But it was during those years that I was on the radio in Cleveland that I discovered freelance voiceover work. And at the last station that I was at, actually at a couple of stations I was at, I was a production director. And at that last station I was at was the production director, which meant that I was responsible for voicing and recording all the local radio spots for the local advertisers who would be advertising on our radio station. So I spent a lot of time recording spots, but also getting spots in on, this is back in the days of reel-to-reel, 5-inch, reel-to-reel tapes, and that would come in from ad agencies and production companies all around the country. And as I would get these tapes in, and then I have to transfer them from reel-to-reel onto what we call cart, and those are long gone too, because all that tape and silly stuff has gone away in favor of computers, of course. But back in those days, that was my job. So I would hear all these great national announcers on these radio spots that would come in, and I'd be transferring over to cart. And I was just fascinated by all of that. And so then I started getting freelance voiceover work in Cleveland myself after a couple of years, and discovering that there were advertising agencies in Cleveland who were willing to pay me, good cash money for voicing their commercials apart from the radio station, where I didn't get any extra money for voicing spots. It was just part of my job. So after about 5 years of that, I ended up making more money a year doing the freelance voiceover stuff than I was working 6 days a week at the radio station. And I thought this doesn't make any sense. So I quit the radio station, got out of my radio career, was just going to freelance in Cleveland and like Detroit and Pittsburgh, sort of the Midwest area there, and get agents in each of those markets and just try and really make my freelance voiceover stuff the basis for my career. But then shortly after this, in the summer of '84, shortly after I quit that last radio station I was at, I got a call from the landlord of the house that we were renting. My wife and I had 3 kids at the time, and he said that he was selling the house, and we had to be out by the end of September of '84. And I thought, look, I hate moving, and I've always wanted to go to either New York or LA and pursue this acting thing. And I had just turned 30 at the time, and I thought, I've quit radio, and if I've got to pack up my house and actually physically move my stuff to another domicile, I'll be darned if I'm going to move across town. I'm going to move either to New York or LA and take a stab at it. So I went out to LA just after the Olympics of '84, and looked around, found a little place to live out here. And 2 weeks later, we were living here. Moved in over Labor Day weekend of '84 and kind of never looked back. But I left a lot in Cleveland. I mean, my wife had family there, and of course, I had a lot of friends there and my radio pals. But I was also still doing a lot of work. I mean, I was hosting a nationally syndicated dance show that I was flying down to Atlanta every other weekend to tape. We'd do 2 shows on a Saturday, and then I'd fly home on Sunday. And I did that every other weekend for about a year. I was pulling the Ohio lottery numbers on TV every night for a year.
Yeah.
I was doing a lot of modeling, for local store, May Company and Higbee's and stuff like that in Cleveland. And I also was doing live spots for Channel 5. Back in those days, they used to have a show on the air called the Afternoon Exchange, and I would go out and do like live bits with bands, and I would interview bands, at clubs and stuff live on Channel 5. And so I was doing that, so I was just doing anything I could think to do in Cleveland in the entertainment business. Like, you guys are in a band, and you just keep pumping away at it,
Right.
and it's all I was doing back then too. I was early 20s, and you just wanted to be involved in the entertainment business any way that I could. So that's all that I was doing back then. So, I mean, that's all just a little background, a little history of kind of my Cleveland days, but how I was doing radio and voiceover work and on-camera TV commercials and theater, stage work, modeling. I mean, anything that I could do. So it was all sort of in this, one big basket of just entertainment stuff. But it's also where I got into the union. I got into AFTRA in 1977 when I was on the radio there. I got into SAG a couple of years, like 2 years later, in like 79 or 80, from doing some national network TV spots on camera in Cleveland. And then in 1983, I was on stage understudying Robert Urich in a play for John Kenley at Kenley Players in Akron one summer in 83, understudying for Robert Urich in Barefoot in the Park. And that's where I got my equity card. So that's when I got my professional actors, stage actors card. So, yeah, all that happened in Cleveland, So growing up in Cleveland, I love Cleveland. Loved it then, love it now. I was just back, you guys. So don't laugh at me when you look at me. This is how old I am. But so I was just back in Cleveland back in May for my 50th high school reunion.
Nice.
Yeah.
How'd that
so
go?
It was great,
Yeah.
saw a bunch of my old pals from, back in the late 60s and early 70s. It's, yeah.
That's awesome. Are you the famous guy that moved to LA to all of them?
Well, I don't know about that. I think a number of them were a little curious about my career and, kind of how I went from doing what I was doing in Cleveland to, to all my cartoon work and voiceover work out here. Yeah. So
Speaking on Cleveland, I was curious, do you remember your first concert like that you went to in Cleveland as a kid? Or if it was in Cleveland?
yeah, listen, let me think about that. I remember, bunches of concerts that I saw, but no, I don't remember my first one. I remember seeing, I remember just seeing a bunch of bands out at, Blossom and downtown, too. Back in those days, they had concerts, downtown. I want to say, I don't remember where it was, not the arena, but some, and it wasn't at the stadium. It
Coliseum.
was some big, yeah, it was at the Coliseum.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. We just
Yeah.
went to Blossom a week ago to see Wu-Tang Clan, who did the theme song for the new Shredder's Revenge game.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Have you guys played that game?
I actually played it last night. My little brother's a big gamer, and he brought it over, and we played it, and it was epic. It was so cool. It was so much like an old arcade game, but more
Right.
modern, and like,
Right.
of course, I played as Michaelangelo, and I'm not
Thank you.
I'm not very good at video games, so I was getting my butt kicked most of the time. And the line I think you say when that happens is like, "Oh, dudes, I'm running out of gas," and he just kept saying that over and over again.
Oh, dudes, I'm running out of gas.
But the game is awesome.
Sorry, Cody. There, yeah. Listen, I'm not a gamer either, so I haven't played it. But boy, going to all these cons and stuff, and talking to folks who have played it, and they all say the same thing, that it's such a great throwback to like those early video games of the 80s.
It's even animated similar to the TV show, like the scenes
Yeah.
and stuff, or everything.
Yeah.
It really feels like the old cartoon.
Right. Yeah, that's what I hear, and certainly from the pictures and from the videos of gameplay that I've seen and stuff, it sure looks like that. Yeah, I think it looks awesome. Yeah, I would listen. I was just thrilled, by the fact that they actually used us original voices on the game,
sure.
because in all these years since we recorded the series, and for those of you who may be watching this and aren't aware, we sort of jumped into this real fast. So I was the voice of Michaelangelo on the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles not video game,
Absolutely.
cartoon back in the late 80s and early 90s. Anyway, so what was I going to say? Help me out, Dave. Help me out. I was just about to say.
I think you're nailing home the point.
So what I was going to say is, in all these years since we did the cartoon, all the video games that they've done since then, not one of them ever used us original voices on. And so this is the first time that there's a Ninja Turtles video game that they actually used the original voices for the Ninja Turtles. So it's thank you for that very much.
Yeah, I think between that and the Wu-Tang song, that's like got the super hype going,
Right. Yeah, right. Thanks.
How was it voicing Michelangelo in a video game, compared to on TV?
Well, it was great, and certainly after all these years to still have some relevance, I mean, that feels good. But in terms of actually voicing him, there was zero difference between doing the cartoon all those years ago and doing the game. Because I can still do the voice. And it's just a matter of reading lines. The only difference with this was we didn't actually have a physical script. All the lines were on a TV monitor. And it was interesting because when you do video games, and of course with the pandemic being what it's been the last like 2-3 years, so much is done on Zoom now, And so when I went in, there were aside from the recording engineer who was on the other side of the glass for me. I was down at a studio in Santa Monica. But the other three cats, the creator, the writer, and the director, were all in three separate locations. One was here in L.A. The director was here in L.A., but the other two folks who were with the two companies who were producing this thing, it's like I think one was in Canada and the other was in, I want to say he was in France. Yeah, but they were all on screen with me at the same time watching, and then on this screen were all my lines. And the way they do it in video games is you've just got either a physical paper script or of just your lines, and or it's on a screen in front of you on a monitor. And in this case, I was just reading the lines off a monitor. So yeah, I mean, it was just, they'll tell you what the setup is, kind of what the feel for that line is, what it's referring to when it says, "Oh man, I'm running out of gas," or "You're running out of gas," or whatever he says. They'll tell you what the setup is for it and what you're responding to. And so then you give them 3 or 4 takes of that, and then boom, you move on to the next line, and they do the same thing with that. So yeah. It was great.
That's awesome. Much quicker and easier.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, my gosh. I mean, if I was in the studio 45 minutes, it was long. Back in the days when we were recording the series, those are 4-hour long sessions, typically. Sometimes they wouldn't go that long. But in that case, when we were recording the series, we're all in the studio at the same time together, so that you really get a roll on this episode from start to finish, and you're all bouncing off of each other, so it makes sense. And then the voice director, the dialogue director, who's in the booth, he or she in the case of Ninja Turtles, it was Sue Blue, will tell you what the setup for a particular line is, because you don't get the writer's script. You get just the recording script, which is just everyone's lines. So there's no direction written down really at all. So you need the director to tell you what's going on in that particular scene or at that particular moment in a scene. So but in the case of a video game, they go much, much quicker. And it also depends on how many lines you have. If you happen to be a character who has 200 lines in a video game or more, you're going to be there a lot longer than half an hour. But in the case of Shredder's Revenge, I don't know exactly how many lines I had, but I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of probably 40, maybe 40 or 50.
Well, I only heard the one because, like I said,
sorry, dude. You're going to just have to play it a whole lot more.
Well, my little brother is like a master gamer, and the only time I play games is with him, and he just whoops me every time, no matter what game it is.
Yeah, right. I get it. Hey, listen, I'd be the same. It's like my kids and my grandkids. They're the gamers, and of course, if they want me to, try and join them. Listen, Mario Kart's hard for me. So
it hurts my eyes. It hurts my fingers. I don't know how I did it when I was younger.
Right. Yeah.
So when you're recording in a session, like with a group, and you're bouncing off each other, like what would be like the kind of cut the refer back? Would it be like you run through a whole line of dialogue and then you kind of reflect on the direction that's given, or would it be kind of like doing like a whole run of like an episode? Does that make sense? Like, is it a lot of cuts in between? Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't. I'm not quite. I'm not quite tracking with what you're asking.
So before the director tells you what's happening, like to the character, is that like how many chunks of dialogue? Is that just with one character's interaction, or is that for like a whole scene?
Well, again, we all have the same script with everybody's lines on it, all the characters. So when we get to a session, first thing we do is they hand us our scripts, And then we either take a pencil and circle we go through page by page and circle each of our lines, or take a yellow highlighter and highlight your lines depending on, what you prefer. And that way you can sort of read through the script. So you take the first 20 or 30 minutes of a session as you're, drinking your coffee and eating your donuts and chatting with everybody, and you go through your script so you can see where the story is going in that episode all the way through. Yeah. And so then when everybody's done that, we all then go into the studio proper, sit at our mic, and they've got all the mics set up sort of in a semicircle, with a copy stand at each mic and a chair, of course, unless the actor happens to want to, work standing up, which many people do. And then it's a matter of just, starting to record at the beginning of the script, and you just start going through and act your lines, until the director tells you to stop. Maybe she'll have you back up. All voice directors, all the dialogue directors that I've worked with over the years, pretty much work that way. They sort of work linearly, sort of start to finish through the episode. And then typically we'll go back and do another full pass of the whole episode. Some directors, like Gordon Hunt over at the old Hanna-Barbera, used to have a very interesting way of doing it. He would just want to get in and out in an hour, boom, and so that's it. And so he would stop. He would make notes about lines that he wanted to pick up, but he would basically go through the whole thing. In fact, now that I think about it, I think he wanted to try and get out in half an hour. I know that Gordon just wanted to. He was like a machine over there. That's Helen Hunt's dad, and he was the casting director and the dialogue director at Hanna-Barbera for years, and was just an amazing guy. And but really, it was like a factory over there. They just, crank these things out. And so he would get casts just in and out, boom, in like an hour. And so what he would do is he would get through the whole episode and then go back and just do certain pickups of a line or two that your character needed to get. And he'd do that for each of the actors. And then, boom, you were done. I don't think he ever went back and just like recorded the whole thing one more time, start to finish. But that's typically the way they used to do it. Now, it's also been a number of years since I've been really involved in animation any longer, so I'm not quite sure how they're doing it these days. I know that things changed a lot with the pandemic, and they were trying to do people over Zoom and using Source Connect or using IPDTL or, one of these platforms where you can get high quality audio going from home to studio. But yeah, so that's, typically how it was done.
That's fascinating. It's interesting. It's like it's to compare it to a band, to be like, record the song and let's go back and go over the bridge or go over the chorus, run that again.
Right.
That's
or to be like, record the whole song,
right,
and then go back and just record the whole song again, and just do that twice.
Yeah,
and then just take the pieces of each of those two takes that you liked, and just marry them together, splice them together.
It's very interesting, the parallels between music and acting, specifically voice acting. You mentioned moving to L.A. from Cleveland with your 3 kids and just your demo, and to me that just spells rock and roll.
That is pretty.
That's
like
a classic
story.
Cleveland rock and roll story.
It was. Listen, it was. I guess you looking back, I suppose I've always been a person who's willing to take some risk, because I think no risk, no reward, right? But at the same time, it wasn't like I just launched out on my own and just made this decision. Now, I did make the decision to quit radio, but that was in favor of doing the freelance voiceover work. But I wasn't just going to up and leave Cleveland for LA or New York, unless I had a really good reason to go. The really good reason to go was that the house I was living in was getting sold, and I had to move.
The ultimate kick in the butt.
Right, exactly. So I often think, if I look back and I think, boy, what would my life and my career have looked like if that house never got sold? Would I still be renting it, 38 years later or something, But I don't think I would have had the guts to just up and move my family out to LA without, knowing. I mean, I knew at the time, I knew like 2 people out here, and I just don't know that I would have done it. But being forced to actually pack up and move a household, I thought, why not? And it seemed like all the signs were sort of lining up. The stars were kind of lining up for that move. And during that summer, it was crazy because I had 2 friends in Cleveland who I ran into during that summer of '84. I ran into them separately. Okay, these completely just individual events that happened, and I hadn't seen either of these guys for a while. And both of them said to me, because both of them, one had already moved out here to LA, and the other was in the process of moving out. And so the first one was a gentleman named Stu Levin, who used to be on Channel 5 out there as the movie reviewer on the Channel 5 News. And he was also an actor and a director himself. And he and his wife, Carol, were moving out to L.A. that summer. And Stu said to me, Townsend, Carol and I have talked, and of all the people we know in Cleveland who ought to be in L.A., you're the one whose name keeps coming up. And I'm like, really? Wow, cool. Interesting. Now that I know that I've got to make a physical move, I'm sort of thinking about maybe moving out to LA. Well, you should. And then this other buddy of mine, a guy named Will Ryan, who with his buddy Phil Barron had, they were Clevelanders as well. And Will was actually, I met Will actually at this radio station that I got my first job at. After he was there, they were changing formats, so I met Will, and I ran into him out at Kane Park, the Summer Theater over there in Cleveland Heights. Yeah. And Will said to me exactly the same thing. He said, Will and I, or rather Phil and I, we've moved out to L.A. We're doing our Willio and Filio thing out there. And of all the people that we know in Cleveland, your name keeps coming up. You should be in L.A., Will would say. And I'm like, wow, that's the second person now who said this summer. I think I got to go out to LA and take a look around. So I did. And that's what I was saying. I found a little place to rent out here. And literally 2 weeks later, because I went out after the '84 Olympics, and 2 weeks later over Labor Day weekend, I was pulling in with another Cleveland buddy of mine, a guy named Jim Brickman, who I had known since he was 15 and was a music director in a play that I did out in Cleveland Heights or University Heights for the Heights Youth Theater. And I was at a radio station in Cleveland Heights called Disco 92 at the time. It was WLYT. I don't know what it is now. 92.3 is the number on the dial. But so in 76 and 77, I was out there doing morning drive at this radio station. Well, at first I was doing evenings, 7 to midnight, and then morning drive. And Jerry Leonard, the guy who had created this Heights Youth Theater, that is what made me want to be an actor when I was in 4th grade. Because in 4th grade, going to Roxborough Elementary in Cleveland Heights, we took a class trip to go see a production of Peter Pan, and I was so enamored by this whole thing. That's what made me decide I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be on stage one day, and so that was in 4th grade. So the same guy, Jerry Leonard, when I'm now an adult and I'm 23 and working on the radio in Cleveland Heights, invited me to be in one of these Heights Youth Theater productions as an adult, because they would occasionally use adults. And it turned out that the music director for this It was called The Reluctant Dragon, and I was the dragon in this big dragon suit. But the kid who was the music director of the band that played was Jim Brickman, who has since gone on to great fame and fortune, and is back there in Cleveland now. But I met Jimmy when he was 15, and we became real close friends. And so Jimmy helped me drive my car out from Cleveland to L.A. Over Labor Day weekend, just before Labor Day weekend of 1984, and that's how I ended up out here. So
it's a huge jump.
It's an epic story.
Yeah, I'll check.
One thing that's interesting about Cleveland is how close knit it is, and like if you have like that bug to do a thing, you can find all the ways to get into all those different fields, and you meet those guys. They're like, I'm doing it too.
Yeah, well, dude, to your point. So when I was in high school, and I either in 10th or 11th grade, I don't remember, but I called. There used to be a radio station there back in those days, and when I was 12, 13, 14, just starting to listen to the radio, and it was all AM top 40 stuff. It was called Wixie 1260, and back when I was in like I said, 10th or 11th grade, I called. I just looked in the phone book, got their phone number, and I called Wixie, and I told them I asked them if I could come down and just watch what they do down there. Could I watch a DJ on the air? And the school that I was going to, university school, was a very progressive, private boys prep school. And they had a lot of money and would get all these cool things. And at the time, they got the very first portable videotape recorder. This is back when it was black and white. It was reel to reel. They were 7-inch, 7-inch, half-inch tape, black and white, in this big 40-pound, deck that you had to, load the tape on manually, and then it was connected to a camera by this, big fat cable that had this little tiny TV in it. There was a monitor. It was the most insane thing. I mean, this is like I said, 1970 or 71 or so. And what our school would do is they would allow, any of us boys to check this thing out, like checking a book out of the library, to use, to go do a project or something interesting. It was just another way for us to learn cool stuff. So I borrowed this, I checked it out, this deck, and I took it down to Wixie 1260, and I actually showed up with this big videotape recorder over my shoulder, and met the DJ on the air down there. His name was Chuck Dunaway, and he invited me into the on-air studio. I got to chat with him, while while a record was running, and then he put up his finger, say hold on, and then he opened the mic and would do his thing on the air, and then close the mic and then turn right back to me, and we'd start chatting again. It was the most insane thing, And when you're like a 16-year-old kid or 17-year-old kid, that is like, are you kidding me? This is this is like magic. This is what I want to do, and and so I got to video record him while I was on the air, and so I have no idea whatever happened to that tape. I just remember him going, so you're video recording on that thing? And I said, yeah. He says, oh, okay, here, watch this. And he goes, he pulls his pants down and moons me, on the video. I'm like, great, what am I going to do with this thing now? So, but took it back to the school and showed the other guys, and it was a big hit back then. But I also called up. This is when WMMS and WNCR were just getting started at the same time. And I called WNCR up and asked them if I could do the same thing, not with a video camera, but if I could just come down and talk to them. And so, I met Billy Bass down there, and this guy who was on in the evening, his name was Tree, and he was a real tall guy, which is why they called him Tree. And this guy and I, we hit it off, and he let me come down and answer request lines when I was like 16. And so I would go down the evening down to downtown Cleveland, and answer the request lines on WNCR when they were just getting going. So that was a blast. So yes, to your point, Cleveland was one of those towns where, and certainly I think maybe it was easier back in those days than it might be now. I don't know. But back in those days, it was the kind of place where, if there was something you wanted to find out about or go do, or somebody you wanted to meet, you could just call them up. You could just open the phone book, get their number, call them. And, 9 times out of 10, they'd be like, sure, come on down, happy to meet you, Of course, it was all about relationships, and being a decent person so that you weren't going to, scare them off.
Or moon them.
Or moon them, right? Well, I guess you got to wait until you're big and famous on the radio and to be able to do that. But
I was going to ask, was that like the Peter Pan of radio experiences? But then he said he mooned you.
Yeah,
to see someone jump into character that quickly.
Right.
That's amazing. And I will say, I believe there's still that spirit in Cleveland that if you know someone and you come at it, they'll let you in and show you around.
I would think so. I would think so. Sure.
Was it so kind of on that radio topic, like when you're recording yourself and you're cutting these clips and really I guess if you're taking requests at 16, you're really hearing your voice. And did that make it easy to act with it because you were hearing it back so much?
Yeah, but don't get me wrong. I didn't mean to imply that I was on the radio.
Right.
At 16, I wasn't.
Oh,
all I was doing was go.
Okay.
I caught that.
I wasn't even queuing up. All I was there was just answering the request lines, the phone. So the DJ on the air, his name was Tree.
Gotcha.
So he was the guy who was actually spinning the records and opening the
You
mic
were
and
off
talking.
air
Okay.
answering the
I
phone.
was off air. I was just sitting behind him. Yeah, and in this very small studio, that 3 walls of this studio were just nothing but, racks and racks of shelves of albums, LPs. And so, and then I had the phone next to me. So when the phone would ring and it was somebody calling in for a request, I would answer that, while Tree wasn't on the air, and I'd just answer the request lines for him. And if the phones weren't ringing, it was just me and Tree just chatting. And I was, asking all kinds of questions about his background and about radio and about, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. So, no, I didn't. Okay. This is before you really got involved in any of the voiceover stuff at all.
Got it.
Yeah.
But when you did, was listening back like that easier to act with it? Act with your voice because you're hearing it back so much?
Yes. I mean, the short answer is yes, because, when you, but not at first, because when you it's like any other job or anything else, we do, none of us starts as a professional,
right.
Anything,
yeah.
Whether it's playing whatever instruments you guys play or singing or talking or anything. When none of us starts as a pro, we all start as a beginner, so you try and emulate or copy those people you look up to, and see how well you can kind of hang in there, listening to their chops and then trying to do it yourself. But then over the years, you learn and you grow and you learn what works and what doesn't. You start to learn your own style. You start to hear your own voice rather than, trying to be somebody else, or emulate or mimic somebody else,
right.
Which is fine when you're just getting started. But unless you're an impressionist, which I'm not, at some point you're going to start discovering your own strengths and your own sound and your own style. It doesn't matter what it is you're doing, whether you're voice acting or playing an instrument or singing,
right.
Or as an architect or whatever, we're all made up of different stuff. So no matter what it is we do, we're never going to be doing it just like somebody else. Unless, again, you're an impressionist and trying to actually, match somebody else. But that's not what most of us do.
Right. No, that was very well said. It was interesting. We had a conversation with Kevin Eastman that was kind of similar. And he was talking about taking influences from Jack Kirby and Frank
Sure.
Miller. and like paying homage and not being like kind of afraid to be like, this is who I like. But I came up with these guys. Do you ever? You had to meet Kevin Eastman, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, we've done a bunch of Comic-Cons with Kevin Eastman. I remember actually before we even got busy doing the cons years ago, there was an outfit who was doing a documentary about our show.
Oh.
And we shot it over. What's that?
Turtle Power, right? Was that the name?
Was that the one? Honestly, I never ended up seeing it, so I don't know what it was called. But we ended up shooting it over at Kevin Eastman's house. Here in town, and so that was the first time I think that was the first time I actually met Kevin in person. But since then, we've done just boatloads of Comic-Cons with him, and so he's just such a great guy, a really delightful man. Yeah, I just saw him down at San Diego Comic-Con back in July.
Yeah.
How was San Diego?
It was a zoo, like it always is.
That's what everyone's response.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about San Diego Con. It used to be that this was the first year. Well, of course, with the pandemic, we didn't have the con down there over the last couple of years. So this is the first year back in person, and it was a little dialed back a little bit, just because I think they might have restricted the number of tickets that they sold this year because of the pandemic, but. So it wasn't quite as hairy as this year as it's been in the past. But also, I for the last, 15 years, maybe I'm guessing, I've been going down to San Diego Comic-Con every year, not for Ninja Turtles and not as an exhibitor. In other words, I didn't have my own table with my pictures that I was selling and stuff like, I do it. Where I met you, Coda, in Chicago.
C2E2.
Chicago is where we met, right?
Yeah, Chicago, C2E2.
Chicago, yeah, right. And but what I would do is for a bunch of years, I've been going down to San Diego Comic-Con to sit in the New England Comics booth, which is the company who put out the comic book of The Tick originally.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and so they would just invite me down, and again for any of your listeners here, so I was the voice of The Tick, that big blue guy right back there.
Of course.
Which was a show that was on Fox Kids from 94 to 96 or 7, somewhere in there. We did 3 seasons. Anyway, so they would invite me down and just have me hang in the booth with them just to meet fans and sign autographs and stuff. But this was the first year in all these years that they didn't have a booth in San Diego.
Because it was kind of limited.
I'm not quite sure what their rationale was for it, but they just didn't. So I ended up going down this year because I was on a voice actors panel with a guy named Mark Evanier, who's an animation historian and also a writer, very prolific writer, cartoon writer, wrote and directed the Garfield cartoon all the years that it was on. So anyway, he every year down at San Diego and at other cons, he puts on this voice actors panel where he gets like 6 voice actors, and we do silly things. We take questions from the audience and then also perform a script that Mark brings along, and he assigns us each a character in the script and tells us what kind of voice he wants us to do for that character. So those are always a lot of fun. So I did that for him this past back in July, and then also taught voice actors kind of how to break into it and kind of what voice acting is about with a buddy of mine named Scott Brick, who is one of the world's most preeminent audiobook narrators now. He's done over 1,000 books and highly sought after and just an amazing guy, amazing talent.
That's a long session. An audiobook? That's a long that's a long gig.
Yeah, and dude, you won't catch me doing them because I don't have the attention span for it. All my voiceover work primarily. So back in 1993, when I was still doing Ninja Turtles and just before I got the tick, I got this fluke audition to go down and do a promo, a network TV promo. Now, promos are commercials for the shows on their network, right?
Right.
And so I went down and auditioned for a promo for a campaign that NBC was starting called Must See TV. And I ended up, they liked what I did, and they ended up putting it on the air that night. And it was the first promo for the John Larroquette show. And my understanding, it was the first Must See TV promo back then. Well, they liked what I did, and so called me back in like the next day and the next day after that. And so for like a week straight to do more promos for NBC. And so within, like, that was in August of 93. By Halloween, they gave me the Tonight Show promos as well for Jay Leno. And they ended up keeping me for 16 years. So I was the comedy voice on all the comedy promos for NBC for 16 years. So starting with Seinfeld, Frasier, Friends, Mad About You, Blossom, all those shows way back then in 93, 94, 95. In fact, I launched Friends in 95, all the way up through 2009 and 30 Rock and The Office and Community, shows like that.
We're big Community fans.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So I launched that show too. Yeah. And then they let me go in 2009, and then I ended up over at ABC doing the same thing for about 5 years. And then they let me go, and then I ended up over at Fox doing the same thing for a couple of years. So it was so what I'm saying is my whole voiceover career for a long, long time was in 5-second, 10-second, 15-second, 20-second, 30-second chunks.
Wow. Yeah.
Never longer than a 30-second promo. And that was it. So, and it was all really fast paced, super high energy, and you're sort of in and out of that promo in as little as 4 seconds, or perhaps as long as 30, but half a minute was as long as they ever got for me. So the whole notion of I'm sorry?
That's what's crazy about voice acting. Some of the stuff you can't even like look up. When we look at your IMDb, it could never tell us all these things, and you never know until you hear the person do that voice.
Right. Yeah. So back in those days, my whole voiceover career was in these very short time increments with a ton of energy. So this whole notion of doing an audiobook where you're sitting in the studio reading a book for hours and hours and hours and hours. I'm like, no, I can't do it.
That's well, it's kind of like the Hemingway 6-word story, right? Where you can say tell a whole story in 6 words. It's really hard to do, but I think once you get in that flow and mindset, it'd be really hard to do a whole paragraph.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's incredible. So, like, was that easier to do after doing TV shows and kind of putting work in long commercials, or not long roles? Was it easier to?
You mean like doing cartoons?
Right. Like,
it's just. I'll tell you, Dave. It's just a different discipline within the same sort of voiceover realm. Yeah. It's like, and the thing is because I never thought about doing promos because I didn't have a voice. I didn't think I had a voice for promos. I don't have one of these, big stentorian monster voices like Ernie Anderson. So Ernie Anderson's from Cleveland. You know who he is?
Oh, yeah.
Ernie. Okay. So Ghoulardi. And I grew up watching Ernie as Ghoulardi. He blew up one of my models that I made one time on air one night with his cherry bomb or M80 or whatever he used to blow those things up.
That's a Cleveland rite of passage for sure.
Right? So back in those days, you're a 12-year-old kid and you build these models and you go down to Channel 8 and you wait outside, in the afternoon on a Friday and you leave it at the front desk and say, please, I hope he blows this up on the air tonight. Which he did do one of mine one time. But yeah, but Ernie, of course, was the promo voice of ABC, long before I was at NBC. And he had the Love Boat. He had just had this just amazing voice and amazing talent. And so I figured I didn't have that kind of voice. So I never really thought about doing promos until I went on this audition, but they were looking for something very different then. They weren't looking for that kind of voice. They didn't want a promo sounding voice. They wanted really just a guy who was, I think, younger and just more conversational is what they were looking for. Now they ended up sort of getting away from that, but what I found comfortable for me when I went and auditioned for it was it felt very much like radio, because I had to watch this promo on the screen in front of me, and I'm looking at the script, and so there would be a little bit of the actor on screen on the show saying a line, and then it would cut to me saying a line, and then another line of the actor or another actor, so it would sort of go back like that, so back and forth like that. So for me, all I had to do was read my little bits and just make sure I could squeeze them in between each of their lines on camera. Okay. Well, there was something that was very, it just felt very familiar to me because it felt like being on the radio. It's like talking up the intro of a song on the radio, and you've got 11 seconds to say what you want to say and then shut up as soon as the vocalist, the singer, starts singing the lyrics. Well, it's the same sort of talent. So in voiceover, at least back then, it's not as important now because of computers, and you can time compress and expand stuff, and you can you can slide stuff around. You couldn't do that then. Back in those days, it was all on big 2-inch tape, and so when they went in to record, you had like one shot at it to be able to make sure you did it right, and they would do it start to finish. So if it was a 30-second spot, they would roll it from the top. You'd hear these 3 beeps at the top, and then you'd start talking, and you'd have to look at your script and keep an eye on the screen at the same time, listen for these cues, and then have to squeeze all that stuff in. And generally, for network promos, they're on a tight schedule, so they got to turn this stuff around really quickly because they've got a lot of stuff to do. So you don't have the luxury of doing like 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 takes. If you can't get it in 2 takes, then you're kind of in trouble. So back in those days, it was all about having a clock in your head. You had to have an internal clock. You had to have a sense of the timing. And it was exactly the same as being on the radio. You had to have that internal clock. And so when I auditioned for that, there was something really comfortable to me about having that sense of timing. So I knew that was something I could do. But then it also drew upon my animation background and my voice acting background to be able to, sort of shift gears and give them stuff that they were asking for in terms of sort of more, because I would look at my promo announcing as being a character. It just, wasn't on a half-hour TV show. It was in a half-a-minute TV show, if you will. Okay? So, so there are a lot of similarities between all this stuff. It's just they're different disciplines all within the same realm of voice acting.
Incredibly insightful answer.
Well, thanks, man. Hey, you hear that? It was insightful. I knew I could get insightful today. All right. Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Really quick, I just wanted to say, I know we jumped right into this. I just wanted to kind of let you know, we usually do real epic intros after we're done recording. So we'll let the people know everything, all the epic credentials, I just wanted to let you know that. So anytime we brought up a character, you didn't feel like we were dusting you on that.
No, I don't feel dusted at all. I was just wondering where the epic was. Where's the epic? The epic.
You'll hear it when the episode comes out.
Well, that makes me think about what you had to do, and like I'm gonna definitely do 2 takes, and how hard that would be, and how hard that sense of rhythm would be to develop. But that's so cool. You had all the experience to find that timing. And it's interesting too, like how people kind of like you didn't think you had a promote or an announcer or promoter ad voice, but how people can kind of define what that is you have and how you can really embrace that role. That's really cool.
Right.
And opening, and like that seems like a really like, wow, limitless field to be in.
It really is. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I like it so much. And you know, there's so much variety. There's so many different little subgenres within voiceover stuff. I mean, you know, you called out audiobooks. But I mean, there's animation, there's promo, there's commercial, of course. I mean, commercial was the third leg of my voiceover career that was really, that's been significant for years. You know, back in the days when I was working so much, all the way from 1985 all the way up through, you know, into the early 2000s, had a bunch of commercial campaigns that were, you know, really, really great for me. Like Home Depot, for instance, was the voice of Home Depot for 8 years. Taco Bell, Jenny Craig,
7-Up spot.
Hot Wheels, 7-Up. Yeah, I was the 7-Up spot for 7 years. Yeah, that. Yeah, that was he was some fun to do.
That was one you did at C2E2. That when you did it, I was like, whoa, I had no idea he did that.
Yeah, you know, so yes, there are all kinds of opportunities just within the whole voiceover realm, you know, which have made it very cool. So you know, commercial, animation, promo, audiobooks. You know, doing phone trees, you know, when you call a company and you get that voice on, you know, that answers the phone and then asks you for all the, there are people who do just that, who do phone trees, you know, or a lot of educational stuff, a lot of industrial stuff. They're just, there's so much, Yeah. And well, in narration too, you know, like if you ever watch like a documentary on History Channel or something, like those guys, you know, they got great voices and great, you know, a great sense of presence to be able to present that stuff in a compelling way. You know, that's I've maybe done one or two of those over the years.
I was going to say I'd love to hear you do that.
It's kind of not my thing, and the ones that I've auditioned for, I never book it. They, you know, they're always looking for sort of that David Attenborough kind of.
I would want one of you just narrating in Michelangelo's voice, or the Tick's. The Tick's voice would be great for a documentary.
I would like to see that of you going through your day, like
a Tick documentary of my day.
There you go.
He stubbed his toe once again.
While we're on the topic of the Tick, do you have a favorite Tick-ism? Maybe
a favorite tick?
It's your destiny. Hug it.
Right. Exactly. They're what I loved about the Tick is the writing was so brilliant on that show. And there are so many great lines, most of which I've forgotten over the years. But every time I do a Comic-Con, and if somebody comes up to talk to me and they're a Tick fan, invariably they've got like a favorite of theirs. So I'll ask them, you know, what was your favorite Tick quote or Tick line, you know, or Tick scene or Tick episode for that matter, you know, and they've always got one, and it always makes me laugh because so often they're ones that I had forgotten that I said, but when I hear them say it, I hear it back in my head and I'm going, oh, that's right. Oh, that was great. There was an episode that I loved called The Tick versus the Tick. And it's where a character named Barry comes busting into this superhero lounge and wants to confront the Tick. And Jim Cummings did the voice of Barry. And so he comes into this thing, he goes, "Who's the jerk who calls himself the Tick?" And I say, "I am that jerk. Who wants to know?" And it's like just writing like there was another line from that episode shortly after that exchange where Tick says to Barry, he says, Yeah, well, don't count your weasels before they pop, dink.
That's pure
like-
classic Tick.
Oh, man, yeah.
Did you?
Hang 10 for justice. Honk, honk if you love justice. In fact, hold on.
Oh, here we go.
My Tick buddy here, I've got to handle him with kid gloves, gingerly, because he's broken and his butt actually falls off here. And when his butt falls off, then the whole torso falls off, and then I got to put him back together. But let me see what comes up here. He's got like 6 or 7 different phrases that I recorded for this toy.
Oh my gosh!
Years ago. But it's always random. You can never get. It's just always random. Let's see what he says.
Eagle is a foot. Not each one, you face the Tick. I am the Tick. Keen. I am the Tick. Oh, gross. I am the Tick. Oh, gross.
Well, he's just going to keep going over saying the same thing. But he does say, spoon! Which, of course, was the Tick's battle cry. So,
did you
there
sing
he
the
are.
theme song for the Tick? I was curious.
Did I sing it?
Yeah.
No.
Did you do any singing on the show?
I did.
I was gonna say I remember the episode where he gets a mustache. I think you sing a little mustache song when he.
I do. There's a song in the Milk Mustache. But then he also sings a song in the episode where he's all forlorn over losing Arthur as his best friend because he starts dating the Carmelita, I think, or Dot. Maybe it was Carmelita, I think, and so he sings this real weepy sort of song. I don't remember how it goes, so I can't tell you. Although, you know what? Screw it. I can tell you. Check this out. So
I thought you were just gonna rapidly push the toys button until it started singing a song.
Yeah, no. So on my phone, so I've got a little folder on my phone that's some of the cartoon singing that I did for various characters that I've done over the years, and this is, I think, that one from the Tick. So let me see if I can bring it up here.
When no one understands you for the little things you do, when destiny strands you or wears you like a shoe, that's when you know it's over. Man, that's when you know it's through. I never thought I'd be so big and blue.
Epic.
There you go.
It sounds like it would be so hard to sing in character like that.
It's not. Because I'm a bit of a singer. Now, I won't say I'm not a singer, the type of singer where I'd ever be in a band or anything like that. But I've done enough
We were going to ask
singing.
you to join the band.
Oh, dang. If I were in Cleveland and you didn't mind getting a guy who's pushing 70, I'm not 70 yet. 2 years away. So give yourself time, Townsend. But because I've done so much singing in musicals and on stage, that doing cartoon singing or character singing is not that difficult for me. Now I'm no Rob Paulson or Jim Cummings, guys like that, but I can hold my own in certain ways. So, yeah.
You mentioned Rob. I have a quick, funny Rob story. At C2E2, I was in the photo op line, and the photo op was scheduled for first thing in the morning, and you guys had been running just a little bit late. So the way they do those photo ops,
we were probably still
stuck in
sleeping.
traffic. Oh, okay. Well, I've never done one of those before, so I just kind of ganged up with the people that had turtle shirts on. But the way they do it is they have like taped off lanes with numbers, and there's no signs for who is what number. There's just someone who tells you the numbers. So there's all these people lined up, and Rob comes out to like apologize for being late, and he launches into this epic monologue where he's bouncing from character to character and apologizing. But
That's Rob.
When he first came out, it was so funny because there was 2 lines for the Turtles, one for like individual and one for the group photo, and then the rest were all lines for other people. He comes out,
And the longest line is for Rob as an individual, and then there's like 4 people in line for all 4 of us.
That's not true at all.
Okay.
But he comes out and he had I don't think he knew that all of the other lines were for other people. He comes out and he greets everyone and he's like, "Oh my gosh, there's so many of you to meet us. I'm so honored." And he starts shaking hands with people that were in other lines. And,
Right.
and I was laughing in my head thinking, oh, these people aren't here for him. They might not even know who he is. And one of the people in the other lines, he shook their hand and they were like, "Oh my God, Rob Paulson?"
Right. Yeah. Robbie's the best.
Yeah.
He's great. Yeah.
You guys were all great. It was a total honor meeting each one of you, and each one of you were so sweet and kind, and all gave the time to talk. And I don't know if you remember, but I had that animation cell that I had each of you signed. It was like an original cell from the show.
Right. Right. So, and what was the cell of? Who was on the cell? All 4 of us?
Yeah, it was a small cell of all 4 of you. And then I did have a separate one of just you, but I didn't realize you guys were cash only, so I couldn't get you to sign that one as well. But I got all 4 of you to sign that original cell.
Hey, we're credit card now.
Figures.
Yeah, didn't help you much then,
Figures.
did it? Yeah, so sorry.
Jumping into turtle questions though,
Sure.
I just wanted to say, like he said at the top, we're both huge Ninja Turtles fans. I got my shirt on. I saw you got a turtle shirt on, I believe.
Right.
And
Hey,
wow,
that's a spider crossover.
oh my
That's
gosh,
rad.
that's quite possibly the coolest Ninja Turtle shirt I've ever seen. But yeah, I just want to say thank you for everything. And like we always tell people the Turtles were the biggest influence on our band because they taught us that we can each own our individual personality and come in together as a group. So
Right.
when we talked to Kevin, he mentioned that every kid has their turtle. So my turtle was Michaelangelo and his was Leonardo.
In situations.
So
9 out of 10 times.
in the band, that's kind of how we fit together. Those are our roles in the band.
Okay.
So I just wanted to, first off, like I said, say just thank you so much because our love for both of us started with the cartoon, you know?
Yeah. And
Well, that's awesome.
And as I said at the beginning, I'm a music teacher at this school. I find for years I was room to room, and they're like, "You can have a cart." I'm like, "Sick, cool." So I'm carrying a class set of pianos from cart to cart. The reason they're broken is because I gotta go over rocks, you know. And they gave me my own room, and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this. I gotta test it out. I'll take it if I can paint on the walls. And they're like, "All right, what are you gonna paint?" I'm like, "A Ninja Turtle holding a guitar." And they're like, "Okay, cool," but I'm not. And then I'm gonna mount it, so it's gonna be a guitar stand. And they're like,
Wow.
And so I got Michaelangelo on the wall. And all
That's so great.
And it hits.
Well,
sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
All the kids still come up and they're like, "Michaelangelo, that's cool." Like, the
Oh,
turtles
that's so great.
still hit. It's so awesome.
That's so great. Thanks, you guys. I mean, and thanks for being fans and you know, because obviously if it weren't for you guys, we wouldn't have a job. You know, there wouldn't have been a show. But I have to just say, you know, and you can imagine as a kid from Cleveland, you know, coming out here and you know, just it's like Robbie says so often, you know, we just hit the lottery, you know, with this show and with our careers. You know, maybe right place at the right time, you know, and a little bit of talent thrown in. But gosh, I couldn't be more grateful than I am for this career and for this particular show, Ninja Turtles. You know, just the fact that, I mean, we started recording that in, I don't remember whether we started in like late 86 or early 87, but, you know, the first 5-part miniseries aired at the very end of 87. And so that was a long time ago. And the fact that it is not only still in the zeitgeist out there all these years later in 2022, but the fact that it in some ways almost appears to be bigger than ever, that this franchise is just so enormous. So to have been a part of the beginning, the genesis of all the cartoon versions of that. It's just such an honor and such a privilege, and so, and I have to tell you guys too, that it was, when we were recording the show, none of us had any idea, that it was going to turn out to be as big a hit as it did. Nor did we have any sense that the lines that we were saying and that we were acting and reading back in those days were going to, somehow gel into an episode that would feature these four characters that would end up having such an impact on so many kids. We just had no idea. To us, it was just, at the time, just another job. And it wasn't until we started going to Comic-Cons that we started to get a sense of that. And then we started meeting you guys, and we started hearing the stories, about when you were 6 years old or you were 9 years old and your parents were splitting up, and, Michaelangelo taught you that it was okay to smile, even in tough times, and that things were going to be okay. Or that Donatello, I had this one very bright, erudite guy at a con in New Hampshire a couple of years ago with Kevin. And he said to me, Mr. Coleman, and I said, you don't need to call me Mr. Coleman. He said, well, Townsend, the reason that I was such a fan of Donatello is because he taught me it was okay to be smart. And I thought, wow, how about that? I mean, these were things that we just never even thought about back then. So I can't tell you guys the number of stories and the quality of stories, and really in many cases, the tear jerkers that we hear, and the times that we've stood with fans and, tears running down both our faces, and, ending with just a big hug. That's stunning to me, and something that I never, ever, ever would have imagined would happen with not only this show, but with my career, that I'd ever be in a place where I'd be meeting people who, were so attached to something that I had done so many years ago, but that it meant something to them, and they're able to express to me now what it meant. So the fact that you guys are such big fans the way you are, and the fact that your band has taken so much from this show and from these characters, I can't tell you what that means. It's like, wow, thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Listen, it makes you one of the wealthiest men ever. I'd have to imagine being able to.
The true joy of putting art out into the world is that
Thank
feeling.
you. Thank you so much. And Dave, boy, you just said it perfectly. Yeah, I do. I feel like, this is riches that just has no comparison, and certainly, the riches of the world, the worldly riches don't hold a candle to the kind of riches you're talking about and we're talking about here.
Yeah.
It just goes straight to the heart. My heart is full of all of that.
Our teacher, George Hartwig, who's a local musician, he says that all the time about just the relationships he develops through music. And so this is at least something I've been very thankful to slightly experience. So to have work like you have done to impact so many people and to get the chance to experience it, that's so cool. Cody, I know you're about to say something.
Yeah.
No, you're all good, buddy.
Okay.
I just wanted to get into turtle questions. Like, I'm
sure.
so curious about so many things.
Sure.
I've heard from some people that you were the one who came up with the phrase "cowabunga." I was curious, was that something that was in the script, or was that an ad lib or you don't really remember?
No, it was in the script.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah, it was something that David Wise, who wrote those first batch of scripts and was the story editor on for the whole series, script editor. He and wrote many of the scripts. No, he was, and where that came from, cowabunga actually came from Howdy Doody back in the 50s.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it was spelled with a K back then. And from Howdy Doody, from that became a surfer's like battle cry. That's where cowabunga, started becoming associated with surfers, but was from Howdy Doody back in the 50s and 60s, I think. So that's where that came from. And David was, God bless him, and R.I.P. He was a great animation historian himself and writer, just profoundly knowledgeable. And so that's where the cowabunga came from. Was for him, it came from the Howdy Doody. And
that makes much more
and the
sense.
surfers, of course. Yeah, and the surfers, of course. I mean, when I auditioned for the show, actually, all of us auditioned for all 4 turtles. And so when I got the show, they hadn't decided whether I was going to be Leonardo or Michelangelo. We've told the story a million times, but yeah, it wasn't until the actual first recording session that we showed up that they were going to have me try it, both characters on that first episode, and they were going to have Cam try both characters as well, and then make up their mind which they wanted to use. Well, they had me do Michelangelo first, and then they just, for a second pass, they just didn't change it. They just kept me on Michelangelo. They were thinking about other things, and I think maybe they were thinking that for another recording session, they might try us switching us off and then change then. But they didn't. So I ended up with Michelangelo. And when I auditioned for it, the prototype that they were using for Michelangelo's character was Spicoli from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And and so they wanted that sort of Sean Penn, kind of surfer dude. They didn't want him too burnt out, and stuff, or drugged out. But they that's kind of was the feel that they were looking for, So I just did. And back in those days, the whole Valley Girl thing was real big, and so I just sort of did my version of that, and it ended up sticking.
That's awesome. You did so many voices on that show. Do you know how many voices you did total?
No. As a matter of fact, there's somebody on Twitter who is like a big turtle fan, and he keeps posting these posts that say, Townsend, I found more characters that you did on, whatever, whether it was Turtles or My Little Pony or whatever. And so really what I ought to do is I ought to go back and just look at all his tweets. That's this thread, and just make a note, make a list of all these characters that he says I've done. I don't know where he finds all this stuff. Maybe IMDb, I don't know. But IMDb is not really that. It's not. I mean, it's sort of as accurate as
especially for voice actors.
Yeah, but no. I mean, there are people who come up and well, it's like on the game that we were talking about, the Shredder's Revenge. When I went down to Santa Monica to record my Michelangelo lines for that, I figured that those were the only lines they were going to be having me do. But then they, what are the other ones? They had me do Michelangelo. I think because on the show, the 3 main characters, well, Michelangelo is the main character I did, but I also did Rat King and Usagi Yojimbo. And so those are the 3 characters that I think most people who are Turtles fans would know that I had done. But when I went to do this session for the game, they had me do a character. They wanted me to do a character called Razar. And I didn't have any idea who they were talking about. Number one, I didn't remember this character. And even if I had remembered the character, I had no recollection of the fact that I had done it. So I said to the recording engineer, I said, are you sure that that's me? Because that's happened in the past for me, where they say, you did this voice, and I'll listen to it and I go, nah, that's actually not me. It's so-and-so. But so he played me a sample of Razar, and sure enough, it was me, but it was this real deep voice version of me that would be hard for me to try and emulate right now. My voice feels real kind of fuzzy, but but yeah, it was me. So I ended up having to do Razar, and then I was reminded that I did Bugman, and that I was Muckman. I mean, like all these characters people are reminding me of, oh yeah, and you did so and so and so and so, and I'm like, really? I did? Okay.
Yeah, watching
I
it
remember
now,
that.
I kind of, now that I've met you guys, it's easier for me to hear each one of you on different characters, so I start to notice it more.
Right. Yeah, sure.
Another Turtles question. I was curious, have you ever had anchovies or hot fudge on pizza?
I have not, and I probably won't. But it's my favorite kind of pizza, dude. It's the only kind of pizza to eat. Anchovy and hot fudge. That's like totally mondo bodacious. I would just sit back in the old turtle lair with like 6 of these anchovy and hot fudge pizzas stacked up in front of me, and I would just get sick to my stomach and love every bite of it. Yeah, well, that would be Michelangelo's response to it.
The pizza in that show looked so good. It was like the way they animated it. My whole life I've been searching for cheese that melts that
Cheese
way
that-
it does
that
on the
drips
show.
like
Yeah,
that, right? Yeah, yeah.
Also on the topic of turtles, you guys ran for so long. You held the record for longest running cartoon at a point, and then were beat by the Simpsons. I was curious. Do you have any affirmations for the Simpsons? Are you an anti-Simpsoner? Not because of that.
Oh, of course not. The Simpsons, the Simpsons is in a class by itself. I mean, those people, those cats on Simpsons, from Nancy and Dan and Yardley, and I mean, all of them, they deserve what they've gotten. And the fact that this show is still going, how many years later? 35 years later or something?
Incredible.
I don't know how. It's amazing. Yeah, so more power to him, Harry Shearer, all those guys. Just crazy. Yeah, crazy. Now, I will say that when I saw them start to make the kind of money they were making on this show, it did annoy me, to a certain degree, because we were on the air and within just a couple of years we're a big hit, and then we're like the biggest thing on the planet, after like 4 or 5 years, and we were still working for scale.
Wow.
They never gave us a raise.
Is
and
that
in
because
fact,
of the syndication thing?
no, it was the producer of the show. Just never saw fit to think that we were worth making more than just scale.
We're musicians,
for 9 years,
so
10 years.
You're preaching to the choir here. We've been underpaid the whole time.
Right.
We've been working for the pizza. That's
There
been our
you
pay for
go.
most of the time.
There you go. Well, if you can be satisfied with that and just content with that, you're well on your way to a long, happy life.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm sure you haven't kept up too much with like the comics and stuff like that, but there's a comic going on right now called The Last Ronin. Well, it ended, but
Oh, sure.
if you know about The Last Ronin?
Oh, of course. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And you're familiar with that it was Michaelangelo?
Uh-huh.
Okay, because I've heard many times where you voiced that he would be the last one left. I was just curious, in the vein of that comic, what would you think about you and Rob and Cam and Barry getting together for like a old man Turtles sort of
Serious,
like a serious take on the
Dark
Turtles,
Knight Turtles,
but with the original voice actors?
Yeah, I mean that'd be fascinating, I think. Listen, now that Nickelodeon owns the franchise, for all cartoons and such, and I don't know how the merchandising is split, because I know that Kevin still owns a chunk of that somehow. I think is part of his deal. But since Nick owns the cartoon franchise, I've been hoping that, because there's so many shows that are being, rebooted now. It's like Rob with his Animaniacs and his Pinky and the Brain, coming back, and I'm blanking right now. But like Powerpuff Girls and you name it. I've thought, boy, with the way Nickelodeon is sort of cranking out these various iterations of the Ninja Turtles cartoons, And I think that this current one, the rise of the TMNT, or the most recent one, I would love to see Nickelodeon do a remake, a reboot of our original series. And especially since, all the actors except James Avery, God rest his soul, we're all still around and could do that. And I think that something like that, especially, nostalgia, is such a huge thing right now, and with all these cats who are in there now, you guys are a little younger to be in the age spectrum to be fans of our original series.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, you are, because most of the folks that we meet who are coming to the Comic-Cons and stuff are generally anywhere, sort of mid to upper 30s into mid to even upper 40s. So there's that sort of 10-year span, sort of from 35 to 45, that seems to be really the sweet spot for folks now. I was going to say guys, but it's not just guys, because plenty of women, were fans and show up at these cons too. And weren't just fans because their big brothers were, but, were fans because they were, and they discovered it on TV and have their own personal stories to tell. And it's always fascinating to me. But that's sort of the range from kind of like 35 to 45 that I find, is the age range where the real diehard Ninja Turtles fans are. And so because those people are still not only still around, but have money to spend and, are raising their kids on our original series, they go ahead and buy the whole series on DVD and that's what they're raising their kids on. That's fascinating to me. And because of that, I just think that there might be a real market there for Nickelodeon to tap into.
We obviously agree, and
100%.
We'd be the first ones buying it.
All right. Well, from your lips to Nickelodeon's
I'll call
ears.
Nickelodeon tonight, get it sorted out for you.
Thank you. They may be closed. Shortly, but yeah, maybe give them a holler first thing in the morning and get them on it, would you?
Good call.
Yeah.
Very cool. Do you got more?
No, I'm
That
Hey, listen, there's more. So when I was down at San Diego Comic-Con in July, there's more Ronin coming.
Yeah.
we did see that announcement.
Yeah, The Lost Years.
Right.
It's called. Looks very cool. Down there, I got a chance to meet Ben Bishop, one of the artists.
wow.
Cool. Yeah, he's cool.
For the first time, and he was great. Yeah.
Do you recall any of the Cleveland musicians from?
Well, Michael Stanley Band is was the big
guy,
band that
yeah.
was around when I was there. So they're the ones that I remember most.
They've kind of always been the number one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and a good buddy of mine that I went to school with, a guy named Chris Abood, who is he's a rock and roll writer and writes about Cleveland bands all the time. And got into radio, was in radio down in Akron for a while. But Chris still writes just some great reviews about, bands that come through, often at Blossom. But yeah, I mean, between him and like David Spiro, these two guys are like the, the real historians of Cleveland rock and roll.
David Spiro, he was managing everybody. Did you ever deal with Perubu or any of those cats? No. I just remember so when I was telling you about that TV show that so it's called The Afternoon Exchange on Channel 5 back then. Yeah.
Because there used to be a show on in the morning called The Morning Exchange, which is what preceded it. And then it was such a big hit. And that's actually where Good Morning America grew out of. At least that's what I heard years ago. So the Afternoon Exchange, I was going out doing remotes for them, interviewing bands. But the one that pops to mind is I remember going out and doing and it wasn't just bands. It was like people in the entertainment industry, actors, singers and stuff. But I remember going in and interviewing Wild Cherry.
Oh
Wow.
yeah.
At a small club.
Funky Poodle.
No, they did play that funky music white boy.
Music White Boy. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Who does Funky Poodle? That's another Cleveland.
That is another Cleveland band.
In fact, I used to have a. This is back in the days when satin jackets were so big in
Yeah.
radio and bands and stuff. I used to have a Wild Cherry satin jacket.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's
I
awesome.
don't know whatever happened to that, but
You ever cross Frankie Starr? That guitar player?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Wild Horses. That's who
Wild
did Funky
Horses,
Poodle.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
I got mixed
Okay.
up. They were both super wild.
right.
And both very funky. Well, you got any?
No,
Okay,
yeah.
I always cut Cody off, and I don't mean to. But Townsend, thank you so much for spending
Yeah,
so
man.
much time with us. We really,
Of
really
course.
appreciate it. It's been a blast being able to dive into your career and
Thanks.
and just see all the bits we didn't know that our Michaelangelo was in. You know what I mean? Like it's so and
Right.
just and to know that in your field too, the hustle is real and it pays off. And
Yeah.
and so
Well,
thank
it
you
can't.
so much.
It can pay off.
Yeah, it can.
Just being realistic here. It doesn't always have plenty of people out there who hustle like crazy, and just never get that break
Right.
for whatever reason. But you can't get that break unless you do hustle. It's like you can't get the hit unless you step up to the plate, and maybe you've taken 900 swings without a hit, and you're ready to just toss in the towel. Well, that's up to you. Maybe you do. But if you think you still got it in you and you can still, take a whack at getting a hit, you got to step up to the plate and take that one more swing every single time. It's hard. And I'll be perfectly honest with you. Listen, I've been doing voice work, if you think about it, since I was 21.
Mm.
Yeah. When I got my first job on the radio there, and have been fortunate enough to have been pretty much working nonstop, certainly here in Hollywood, since then. Since I was 21 and got on the radio, and 10 years on the radio and doing voice work in Cleveland and stuff, and then moved out here in 84. By 1985, I was working steadily and have been working steadily until 3 months ago.
Yeah.
So here we are in September. Yeah, and I lost my last regular daily gig that was paying my bills. I'm back at the end of May, and I was voicing the promos for Live with Kelly and Ryan, with
Seacrest.
Kelly Ripa and Ryan Seacrest, on ABC. And I'd been doing that gig. I did that gig for like 16, 17 years.
Are you,
back
are you
when it
still
was-
doing Adventures in Odyssey?
Still doing Adventures in Odyssey. That's like the one last thing that I have, and I've been doing that for 30 years. So and it's probably
So
one
you
of the
do
gigs
have
that
a
means
gig still.
I do have a gig. Thank you for reminding me of that, Cody, because and that's one of the gigs that is one of those perennial gigs that just probably means more to me, just on a personal level and certainly on a spiritual level than all the other work that I've done combined. And the fact that they're still using my character and that they still hire me, a couple of times a year, and I still get to go into the studio and see my good buddies from Focus on the Family. Yeah, Adventures in Odyssey is a huge part of my career. And so, yes, thanks for reminding me of that. I appreciate
I'm always
that.
here to remind you.
Thank you. Thank you, dude. Yeah.
Your dad wanted to be a voice announcer, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so that's
In
wild.
fact, I'll tell you, my folks met when they were working at NBC
yeah.
in Manhattan, in New York City, at 30 Rock, and that was in like 1950 or so, 51, and so they were both working at NBC. My dad was the head of the tour division, so he worked in guest relations and was the manager of the tour division back in like 1952, 53, 54 in there. And he also one summer produced a comedy team called Bob and Ray, which you guys probably haven't heard of, but they were very famous back in those days. And my dad's goal, he liked what he was doing, but his real goal was to want to be an announcer for the network.
Yeah.
And back in those days, you had to actually go through a program that they had where that they would train you. So you had to audition for this program, and then you had to graduate from this program. And even that didn't guarantee that you were going to get a gig at the network. Well, my dad auditioned for this thing, I think, a couple of times and didn't even get into the program and was so discouraged by that. Finally, in 1955, when I was a year old, he just up and quit NBC and moved us to Denver in 1955. But when he got to Denver, he got a job on the radio and was doing news on the radio in Denver. And I think maybe he had his own music program too. I'm not really sure about that, but I know he was on the radio for a couple of years, at least through 1957 or 58. And then that was the extent of his broadcasting career, if you will. But years later, when I got the gig at NBC here in town, he would come out to visit me from Florida every so often, and I got to take him down to the network and show him around. And he always got a big kick out of watching me do my network announcing. The very stuff that he wanted to do and never got a chance to do. So he sort of got to live vicariously through me, and then always I'd take him to the Tonight Show, and he got a big kick out of seeing that, and going backstage and stuff. So yeah. Yes, he wanted to do that, never got a chance to really experience that himself, but I think got to experience it a bit through me. So that was a real blessing.
It's so awesome you were able to give him that opportunity.
Yeah. It meant a lot to me, and I know it meant a lot to him.
That's so cool. Yes, similar thing for us with our dads. Both of our dads, his dad doesn't play, my dad does play a little bit, but still, like, they both kind of always had musical aspirations, and we bring them both to the gigs, and they get to live vicariously through us, like you said.
Excellent. Yeah.
That's
so
gig,
great.
It feels really good.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you want them to see you succeed, not like go down in a ball of flames.
Yep. Which they've seen many times.
Oh, I know, it's painful, isn't it? Yeah.
So cool.
Dad, it gets better. It really does.
We promise.
They also hear us in the basement, so they know the lowest of lows.
And the highest of
Right.
highs.
Right. That's so great. Yeah, well, both I've got 4 kids and 2 stepsons as well. But I've got 2 boys and 2 girls of my own, and both my boys are musicians.
Yeah.
My oldest, he plays bass and guitar, and he's a recording engineer, and his whole family, his wife and 2 of their 3 boys are very, very accomplished musicians. His wife is a pianist, and their 2 boys, they've got a boy who's 17, and he plays a baritone, which is a small tuba, and piano as well. And then their youngest son, who's 15 now, plays piano like a concert pianist. It's unbelievable to me. And he plays sax in the marching band. So he and his bigger brother, they both play in the marching band. It's a very, very musical family. And then my youngest son is a drummer, and a killer drummer. So where they got these musical chops, I'm not quite sure, because I'm not a musician. I got a bunch of hand drums and stuff. But I don't play anything else. That's cool. Neither did their mom. So not quite sure where it came from. But
you raised them right.
You got that.
Well, you know what I did? What I did is I filled the house with instruments is what I did.
That's what I do.
Because it was sort of a feeling for me, like, so if we get a piano, or if I, and I had a flute at the time, which I still have, but I thought if I get a saxophone and I get a clarinet and I get a violin, which I don't have, but I get these various instruments and a guitar and a bass, and just have them around, and the kids are growing up with them. Who knows what? Maybe one of them might pick something up and go, "Oh, this is kind of fun," And that's exactly what happened with both my boys. Yeah,
that's awesome. Like I said, I try to do that with my daughter. I have a piano set up right by her toys for her to play with. I let her play my bass and the drums. We have a trumpet that she tries to blow into, and
she's 1.
Yeah,
there you go. She'll be 2 in a couple months.
She can
Oh,
find
that's so
middle
great.
C. It's wild. Cody would be like,
Cody,
find
that's-
C. And she's like,
That is so great. Keep doing that. Listen, one of my favorite pictures I've got of my youngest son, who's 36 now. I got a picture. He's the drummer. I got a picture of him when he was, I'm guessing, like maybe 5 or 6, sitting at a Muppet Babies drum kit that we got him.
yeah, that's awesome.
I can picture it now.
Yeah, and he's wearing he's got a cowboy hat on. It was great.
It's wild to see that. It's wild to see where kids go, and like
Yeah.
We're gonna have to do a gig with one of your kids. One
yeah,
day.
let's book them in Cleveland.
There you go.
There
you go.
What was I gonna say on that? It's escaping my mind. But kind of growing up thinking about rhythm and using it for your career, and having hand drums and just having it around. I think it's innate. People pick up on rhythm when it's.
One of the things when I teach, because I teach voiceover as well, one of the things that I teach, and I bring up in a class setting, is I always try and find who the musicians are in the class, because I find a real connection between people who are musically inclined and have a great sense of rhythm, but a great sense of pitch as well. Are often the ones that can find themselves excelling or succeeding to some degree in voiceover, and especially in promo, if you can believe it.
Yeah.
Because promo is so much about timing, and just these little nuances of shifting time from one take to the next.
Yeah.
And so it's always interesting to me the watching the folks who are musically inclined. And or are musicians, watching them perform, even if they've never done it before, as opposed to people who like have no musical ability, not much of a sense of pitch or timing and that kind of thing, because all of this plays really innately and intimately into voiceover for sure.
That's very interesting. I brought up my little brother earlier. The gamer, his name's Justice.
Yeah,
he's
Justice.
He's
honk, honk if you love justice. Well, that's perfect,
right?
That's perfect. I love justice, and you tell him that.
He's 20 years old, and he's kind of wants to get into voice acting. I was just curious if you had any advice. I know it was a different time when you broke in, but I was just curious if you had any just general advice for him as far as that. Right now, he is my apprentice doing plumbing, so he's not enjoying that as much. So.
Yeah, I'll bet. So sweating pipes maybe isn't as much as isn't as much fun as sweating it in front of a microphone.
He doesn't like getting into cabinets.
Yeah, I hear you. So there's a voice actor named D. Bradley Baker, who is very prolific, just monstrously talented, and a terrific human being. And Dee has a website called iwantobeavoiceactor.com. That's the first place I would send Justice. Have him look up Dee's website called iwantobeavoiceactor.com. It's free. It's just all kinds of information and materials and stuff for him to look into. It's a great place to start. Other than that, there are just bunches. First of all, if he's really interested in it, have him listen to as many demos, voiceover demos, as he can get his hands on. And you can usually go to an agent's website. Like if you go to DPN's website, that's my agent, or you go to SBV, or, look up who the big voiceover agents are, either here in LA or in New York or Chicago. And then go to their website and just listen to demos and listen to what these people do, and have him try and just narrow down what he thinks might be his range and his type. Okay. And start there. Then get a decent microphone. You guys have a couple of decent microphones there. Have them get a decent microphone, decent pair of headphones. And no, they're good. Those are Shure.
He was giving me the look like they're not.
I like to tease Dave, but
Thank you,
you had his back.
Yeah. Yeah, no, those are good mics. So yeah, just have him get a decent mic, a decent USB mic if he wants. Doesn't even have to be an XLR mic like you got there. Pair of headphones and his laptop or desktop and just start recording himself, getting used to his own voice, and have him, like I said, pick some demos that he feels might be sort of his type, and have him just try and mimic those and see if he can do it, see if he likes it, see if it comes naturally to him.
Like doing
and
a cover
then at
song.
some point, I'm sorry?
Like doing a cover song.
It's like doing a cover song, yeah. But again, at some point, he's going to want to not try and just mimic these people. He's going to want to start to try and dig deep inside himself to try and find his own voice. And how would I read it? Not reading it like him, but how would I do it if I just had this script in front of me? This is how I would do it, and then keep doing that over and over. I imagine that in Cleveland, it's been a long time since I've been gone, but I know that there are at least a couple agents there. And there probably are workshops, I would guess professional voiceover workshops, or voiceover training of some sort in Cleveland. It's a big enough market. Have them start getting involved in that kind of stuff. And then down the road, he might want to look at some of the casting websites that are online, like Voices, not Voices, but Voice 123. There are a bunch of them. The only problem with those is they're typically pay to play. So you've got to join these websites in order to even just get the auditions. Okay. You kind of want to avoid that if you can, and get an actual agent there in town, a real human being that you're not paying, except your 10% when you get a gig. So that's what I would do. Cleveland's, I'm sure, a big enough market that he can find a voiceover workout group or a workshop or just a voiceover training of some sort. And then, at some point he'll want to put together a demo when he thinks he's ready, and when an instructor thinks he's ready, and he'll want to go try and get an agent there in town. That's what I would do. And then take it from there, just see where it goes,
That's really sound advice. I really appreciate you diving in deep for that.
Of course, man. Yeah. Check out D. Bradley Baker's website. I want to be a voiceactor.com. It's a great place to start.
What about your teaching? Do you want to plug that at all, or is there any way he could get involved in that? You guys? No,
I'll be perfectly honest with you. It's not something, I only teach for just actually only one outfit up in Sausalito, up in the Bay Area. And I teach for them basically twice a year. But with the pandemic, it's all been sort of odd because it's been online. So I've had to get used to teaching online. And who knows, now that I've lost this last gig of mine, except Adventures in Odyssey, I may find myself in a situation where I might have to, start teaching more and start taking on some students, in which case I could do that online very easily. But I've got other stuff I'm trying to kind of concentrate on now and different direction that I'm thinking I want to head. And so I want to give that a shot first.
Audiobooks.
Audio. Yeah, well, maybe not.
Any you would like to share?
Anything else?
No, any of those directions that you would like to share. I don't know if you're ever.
Oh, yeah. So yeah. When I moved out here in 1984, I did not come out here to do voiceover.
Right.
I did not come out here to do cartoons or network TV promos or even commercials. The only reason that because when I was at that last job, that last radio station that I was at, and I had put together a really strong demo as I was leaving the radio station for my career that I thought was just going to be in Cleveland there and sort of in the Midwest. So I wanted a really strong demo to be able to sell myself. Well, that's the demo I ended up taking out here to LA. And that's the demo that got me my first agent 2 weeks after I moved here. I got very lucky very quickly. Because of that demo, I knew that I could get work doing voiceover work to some degree. Not what it ended up turning into, of course, but I thought I can make a little money on the side while I'm trying to get my on-camera career, acting career going, because that's why I came out here. I wanted to do movies and TV shows. I mean, that was really my goal, was to be an actor on camera, a face actor, not a voice actor. Well, as it turned out, so I ended up getting an agent for my on-camera stuff, the theatrical stuff. But it was like I was beating my head against a wall to try and get any traction going with the on-camera stuff. You know, I did a few small things. 6 months after I moved here, I did a little part in a movie with Tommy Lee Jones. And my only scenes, and they were like 2 scenes, or actually basically 1 scene, you know, and I just had like 2 lines or 3 lines in this thing. But they were with Tommy Lee Jones. So I got to shoot overnight on this location with him. So that was a real, you know, a real trip for me. And so I thought that my theatrical career was going to kind of take off from that point. It didn't. And so it was just more, it was more frustrating than anything else trying to get the on-camera thing going. Conversely, the voiceover thing, it's like I wasn't even trying to do it, and it was just chasing me down. You know, it's like I was booking so much.
Yeah.
Within about 6 months, I was booking so much from everything that I was auditioning for. I got my first cartoon series. So 6 months after I moved here, within 10 days, it was in the spring of 1985, I got that little part in a movie with Tommy Lee Jones. It was called Black Moon Rising. I got my first on-camera national network TV spot for Kraft barbecue sauce. Which made me a ton of money. That's something. And I got my first role in a cartoon, something I never even thought about doing, but my agent just sent me on an audition for Inspector Gadget. And they had created this character called Corporal Capeman. And I went and auditioned for this thing. I thought, I mean, I didn't know what to expect, but I thought, it's acting, and I used to be on the radio, and I used to do silly characters on the radio. I mean, see what it's about. So the casting director, she handed me a sheet of paper that had a picture of the character on it. And like, I felt like instantly once I saw this character, I knew what he sounded like. So I did that for her. She recorded me on this little, Radio Shack cassette deck on her desk in her office. And that was it. That was my audition. And 2 days later, I got a call from my agent saying that I booked this part on this cartoon series, and it was for the last 10 episodes of Inspector Gadget. And I thought, wow, this is crazy. And so all those 3 things all happened within 10 days.
Wow.
And that was 6 months after I moved here.
Dave, we're moving to LA. Pack your bags.
Yeah. Right. So I don't know why it happened the way it happened. Yeah. It just did. But so I found that the voiceover thing kind of had a life of its own. Right. And after I got that Inspector Gadget, then I got in at Hanna-Barbera and started booking shows over there. And I started booking series after series after series. This cartoon thing ended up taking off. I started getting some commercial accounts, voiceover. The promo thing didn't come along until much later in 1993. But it's like the voiceover thing was really sustaining me. After a couple of years of beating my head against a wall with the on-camera thing, I just gave up entirely. I just quit and just focused all my energy on just voiceover. And that's the way it's been ever since. Now I will say that back then, for about 5 or 6 years, I did quite a few on-camera TV spots. So that was my only on-camera work. But like movies and TV shows just was not happening. And so all the voiceover and all the on-camera TV commercials, those were all coming from my same agents. And so I just went with what was working. So that's a long way of answering your question about, what's some of my thinking now. Well, now it seems as though my voiceover career has kind of gone, it didn't just stop altogether. It sort of tapered off over the last 10, 15, 20 years. I've been getting sort of less and less and less work, but I've always been working at least daily ever since 1985 here in town. Okay, so this is the first time that I don't have some sort of regular gig here. And so now I'm thinking, well, it just sort of feels like, maybe what God is saying to me is that my voiceover thing is done. And now it's time to turn my focus back to why I came out here in the first place. And that's the on-camera stuff. So now as an older actor, as what would be a character actor now, I certainly won't be the, 30 or 35-year-old that I was back then. And I'm 68. But I still have a lot of energy, and I still got a lot of youthfulness. And I still got my talent.
You still look good too.
Why, thank you. Yeah, even with this, you see my pimple on prom night. This is my prom night pimple right there that I grew just for you guys because I knew this was coming up today.
Oh no.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, pals. So I'm thinking, maybe it's time to, sort of shift my gears and maybe start thinking about pursuing for reals why I came out here to begin with. So, and who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. And if it doesn't, then it's time to start thinking. Then I might start thinking about, okay, how can I give back? And maybe in the teaching, the voiceover thing, I could sort of do that in my sleep. And, and I could do that. But I'm not ready to retire. I couldn't imagine myself ever retiring. I don't know what that looks like or means.
Same.
I just have too much. I just have too much energy still. I just got to find a place to focus it and direct it. So, that's
you got my vote as the live action Last Ronin actor. I'll put my card in.
Hey, there you go. Yeah. Listen, on that note, and you guys tell me to shut up whenever you got to get going here. But on that note, I've often thought about talking to Kevin Eastman about taking the four of us original voices, and sticking us into one of these live action Ninja Turtle movies that comes out, just in a little like cameo, but not billed. We wouldn't be in the credits. It would just be, like a little quick, like 10-second, 15-second. The image that always keeps coming back to my mind is, have us, because we all can sing, have us like a doo-wop group, standing on a street corner under a street lamp one night, as action is going on in the foreground, but it goes by these four guys who are, just doing a little doo-wop singing, and they're on a little singing and they're off, and boom, that's it. This is a little Easter egg thing, because I think I know fans would go ape for that.
Yeah,
they just
agreed.
Yeah, if they even recognized it, but it would have to be one of those like real subtle little, Easter egg things kind of in the background, and I think that would be great. I know that the four of us would have a blast doing that, and I know that Seth Rogen is doing this next live action picture that's coming out. So I wanted to ask Kevin that when I saw him down at San Diego, but he was pretty busy, and it was just a hi, how are you? Haven't seen you in a while, and a quick hug. So, so I didn't have a chance to say anything. But yeah, so I think that, doing something like that would be a blast.
That's awesome. Well, if we speak to Kevin again, we're definitely throwing it out there for you. So.
Yeah, great. Okay. Well, thanks.
But no, that's really cool. That's like, I think it's a beautiful circle to the journey you started with. And I think with all the energy you have and all the miles you put into riding the wave of the career, I think it's going to pan out. And
wow, dude, Dave, thank you for that. I appreciate hearing that. I really do.
You're such an animated fun. Like this whole conversation I haven't even looked at. It's been 2 hours, and which is amazing.
Has it really?
It has, and
it's past my bedtime.
You're going to nail it. I know it. So thank you so much for spending all this time with us. This has been awesome.
My pleasure. My pleasure, you guys. Really.
That it's interesting because we during the shutdown, I'm sure you're familiar with the Grog Shop and the Beachland Ballroom. Was that around? Beachland might not have been around, but the Grog Shop had
the Grog Shop. That sounds familiar. Yeah, why?
Like Coventry. No, where was it before Coventry? Do you remember? Okay.
Yeah, I think it was over in Coventry.
Yeah.
I think it was just
because that used to be sort of my old hang.
Yeah.
That disco station I was talking about in 76 and 77 was at the corner of Cedar and Lee.
Oh, okay. We just played there.
Played there.
Yeah.
Not a week ago.
Really?
Yeah, they have a music festival where they make it kind of like Beetle Street, right? So all
Beale.
Beetle, yeah.
Beale Street.
That's what I said.
You said Beetle.
Oh, okay. My bad.
Beatles Street. You got to separate them.
Yeah. That voice acting tip number 1. Enunciate.
Or it's a Beatles treat.
Or it's but they have music all up and down Lee and all these bars
cool.
and stuff, and you can go to a jazz guy or to the loud bar we were in, or like, but we used to stream for these venues during 2020 to keep like them going, and we did a ton of fundraisers to keep like local art galleries open and local venues open, and like, and we would go there and stream, but that latency. Oh my God, it was the worst. And like
we spent a year trying to figure out latency.
Well, thanks, man. More insight. This is double insightful.
Yeah, good. I'm glad.
Yeah, thank you so much, Townsend. We really we appreciate this time so much.
Yeah, you don't even know. We've been geeking about it all week. Like,
my pleasure, you guys. And I know, Cody, you gave me a copy of your album.
Yeah, I did.
I hate to say, I'm embarrassed to say, I have not had a chance to, or I've not taken a chance to pop it in a CD player and actually listen to it. But I will, I promise, especially after this time with you guys. I will.
Awesome.
It's your band that both of you are on, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Great.
I play
and tell
bass.
me what you guys play.
I play bass. He plays guitar and sings. He's more the songwriter.
And
okay,
we've been playing since he was 12 and I was 15. And
there you go.
Yeah, and it's
great.
been really cool. And like that record that I'm sure you gave him Burn, right?
Yeah.
Is like our kind of proudest moment so far. And
all right.
It's kind of like it's funk, punk, reggae, blues, rock. So if any of those hit home, and it's a lot of acoustic, 12-string guitars ran through like Marshall amps. That's weird.
Great. Where did you guys record it?
It's a place called RCR in Solon, and
okay,
it's a small little basement studio. But my buddy there, he does.
I used to love going out to Solon.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm out there
every
week
fall
now.
we would go out there when they buy maple syrup and the fall leaves were falling, and so Solon was always a great destination to take the kids to.
Right. It's a nice
quaint. But you guys live over on the west side, right?
Yeah, we're more
Olmsted?
west side, so it's about
it's
40 minute drive to the studio.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah. But with the guy we work with is really like he keeps us in check, and he's the type of he's recorded audiobooks. So he's the type of guy that has the patience for that. So he has the patience for us is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I look forward to listening to it. I definitely will.
Well, we really appreciate that. I didn't even expect it to make it home with you. Honestly, when I give those CDs out at cons, there's so much going on, and most of the time I just expect it to end up
as a coaster.
Accidentally in the mix of things.
Let me tell you, you guys, I have received so much stuff from fans over the years at these cons, and I have kept all of it.
Wow.
Even the drawings, even the pencil drawings from the little kids. When the families come and they're all in Ninja Turtle outfits, mom and dad, and the two toddlers, and then the one in the stroller, and they're all in Ninja Turtle outfits.
Oh.
And they'll give me something, and one of the kids will draw a little picture for me and stuff. I've kept it all over the years. Yeah,
that's beautiful.
That's so great to hear.
Yeah. Well, man, thank you so much. This
pleasure.
This conversation was so insightful and beautiful, and we really appreciate that time, your time, and thank you.
My pleasure. All right, guys.
Yo, Spike Spiegel here. You just listened to Zig at the Gig podcast. Keep riding the bebop. See you, Space Cowboy. Bang.